Try to change it next time.
All right. Colter, what is your topic?
Why to protect your private information online.
Can I bring you in for my ninth grade class?
You could.
That's what
What
I
hour
covered.
is that?
That's what I covered yesterday, actually.
Oh.
Okay, check. Audience, are you ready? Colter, are you ready?
Yep.
And proceed.
4,772,748. You know what that number represents? That is the amount of people that reported identity theft and fraud online in 2020, according to the Insurance Institute of Information. So when you look at the broad scheme of things, that's only about 1.4% of the current US population, stated by Worldometers on October 27. But if you look at it, the survey from last year from the Insurance Information Institute, the III, the amount of cybercrime has risen 145%. That is an astronomical number. That is huge. Like the amount of crime that's occurring is growing exponentially. It's not just like from 2019 to 2020. Every single year, this number is getting increasingly larger and increasingly larger. So with that, you think, well, what is cybercrime? What actually is it? Does anyone actually know? Well, in a topical page posted on September 20th, 2021, us.gov states that online theft is when a person takes your private information to commit fraud. So you might ask, well, what type of fraud and what type of information? So they'll take your tax, like your social security number, and they'll use tax fraud. They'll file their taxes under you, and they'll get your tax returns for them. They'll make money off of that. There's medical fraud. They'll take your medical ID, they'll take your hospital records, your bills, and they'll charge your insurance provider. They'll charge them money, and then they'll take that. They'll like say that they're a hospital, and they'll take that money back. And so they're taking your money. And then there's the unemployment fraud. So they will take your social security number, pretend to be you, claim unemployment. So they're collecting unemployment checks while you were working. So they're just getting passive income off of you. And so there's definitely ways to see that this is happening. So you can see if there's any bills. If you ever get a bill and it's like, I didn't buy this a week ago, and there's these bills and they're reoccurringly showing up, that someone might have your account information and might be abusing it. If you're trying to file for loans and you're not able to because your credit score is really low, or if a loan account is opened up, or like some sort of account is opened up that you didn't do, somebody might be doing that as well. And then if you apply for like a credit card or anything like that, if you are denied despite keeping on track with your payments, that might be another say of somebody has your account and is using it for your money. So you would think with all of these different types of frauds, the government would come in and be able to protect everything, right? Well, not necessarily. Thomas Reuters Legal states in 2020 that there are no specific laws that regulate internet laws, but instead there's a patchwork that kind of try to help regulate the laws. So an example of this is actually in Minnesota. So the National Conference of State Legislature states that a Minnesota law is that all internet providers in Minnesota are not allowed to give away private information unless the user of that internet agrees to it. That's where your terms and services come into play. I mean, I know a lot of you probably haven't read the terms and services ever because it's boring and it's long, but they find these loopholes in these laws. Like, well, if we can get them to agree to give away their personal information, we can sell it off. So it might be as simple as, can we use your browsing history to find tailored ads for you? You might think, yeah, that's helpful, right? Why not? What they're really doing is they're selling off your search history, your email address, and anything that they can to other companies so that they can send you their information. So they're just profiting off of your information. So the Washington Post, in this argument about government controlling the internet, actually claims that the government should not control the internet. Because think about this, if there's one government controlling the internet is it's the World Wide Web. It connects everything and everyone together. So how could one nation's government control that? The United States rules might go against a European rule or an Asian rule. And so there's no way one government could do this. And if they did, they could restrict it. Look at China. They tried to control their internet and it's extremely restricted. It takes away the freedom of speech and the openness of the internet, the freedom of the internet. That's not necessarily something that we want to do. Now, I'm assuming everybody in here has heard about Facebook and how they sold everybody's private information. BBC, British broadcasting company actually reported on this and said that Facebook was fined $5 billion for reprimations to all of this information getting leaked. And so Facebook is selling private information of their users, and this fine goes back to the government. So all the money that was sold off of you goes back to the government. So nothing that they've put into fact has actually helped you. Like your information might stop being put out there, but it's already out there. So now that that's there and you understand all the things about this, how can you protect yourself from this? Because I mean, all of these, there's no government protection. There's so many people out there trying to do it. Like, what can you do? Well, a Forbes article in 2019 said that there are many ways to protect yourself and your personal information online. And I'll give you a couple of those right now. First one, complex passwords. As easy as it is to use a dog and a birthday for your passwords, you shouldn't do that. You make them hard, complex numbers with, start. I know it's crazy, but instead of using an O, put a 0 in there instead. Something like that. Something that just makes it a little bit harder. Then your email addresses. Have multiple email addresses. Have one email address for your social medias. So that's your Facebooks, Instagram, Snapchat, it's all under one email. Then have one specifically for your banking, nothing besides your finances going there. Have one that's specifically for your families, and then one for your work. Read terms and agreements, and don't share your social security number anywhere. Always try to keep that offline as much as you can. So as the amount of cybercrime has risen and the government cannot necessarily protect you, you need to take your own personal safety online into your own hands and take the initiative to help yourself stay secure. Thank you.
Very good.
That tastes a lot. Dang it. I got 6. I said at least 6. I got 6. Did you read state one? Yeah. Okay, so 6.
Okay, for time, I got 6, 12, 10.
I didn't. 6, 13, 63.
Perfect.
I'm not trying to start any fights or anything, but I will mention 2 people of a political party, but actually 2 of the fiercest advocates for user rights on the internet over the last decade have been 2 senators from Minnesota, Amy Klobuchar and Al Franken.
I don't know that tastes a lot, but
Get a lot of it's partly good.
I thought I did pretty good. I think I missed one of my sites, which I have a bunch of them, so
Just a couple things,
yeah.
but you had a little bit first. I just don't do it.
Yeah.
It was a couple times. It's a huge.
Yeah.
Your tone was really. Just a good solution. Your connection is pretty bad.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Be transparent. But it's pretty in-depth that you explain why we should be considered persuasive. These, I'll take those. I think where the timing might be off is like,
I
I'm like,
didn't go for the thank you, because I wasn't sure if you were supposed to do that.
oh, yeah, that is.
6:50.
Maybe now.
Yeah.
But I was due and let's see,
I like your first note page number.
that is a big number. It's intriguing. People like numbers. What's that?
Yeah.
Oh, the deep water horizon. I'm doing, let me teach.
So it would you say it's the sign coming out of
It's
the
just this big, just like.
Yeah.
No.
Or not flat, yeah.
Oh, is it
No.
like keep down here? So I was like, half right.
An oil platform, yeah, that's the bottom of the sea, that's the top of the sea.
Oh, and that's the one.
That's the oil rig, that's the oil.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, it is, yeah, it's supposed to be an oil rig, yeah. Yep. Not an oil rig. Right, so the drill would come down here.
Oh, you got his developer card? This is not really his.
Sure. There is. We'll get you done, I swear, from about 7-8 minutes now.
What's your topic?
The benefits of lobbying.
Hey, you got extra time on this, that's
What is
nice.
I feel like. Like I'm gonna.
You're just gonna disappear all of a sudden the speech is over. Lobbying.
LOBBYING.
One word, finally one word that's easy to spell.
Yeah. Well, I still spelled it wrong anyways, but.
Oh,
Close.
by the way, I need to put something up on the board. Real quick before we go. We're not talking about rednecks going this way. Huh?
I thought it was one C.
Two C's.
I wrote it like that.
A few of you have. I've seen it more than once, that's why I did it.
I know, I'm pretty sure I did that too.
Yeah, no, there's a few of you, so, for future reference.
That is so.
I think that's our new hold out cam.
Well, how'd you write it?
The first way.
I don't remember. I didn't
First
know.
one too.
Maybe before I go to. I honestly might have wrote HIC up.
That's what I always thought it was.
All right, audience, are you ready?
Yep.
Nicole, are you ready?
Yep.
And proceed.
Now, I believe we would all agree that our country tends to be a bit of a divided nation, tends to have extremist views, although not all people are in that extreme areas. They tend to argue a lot and not explain the actual issues that they're discussing. And one of those issues tends to be whether the Congress or the government in general is being bought by larger companies. And this whole debate is centered around lobbying. Now, what is lobbying? Lobbying tends to be confused with essentially bribing. Bribing and lobbying tend to be pretty similar. There's an opaque line between it. But bribing tends to be a concrete deal. We'll pay you, but you have to do this for us. While lobbying is essentially a donation of goodwill. Lobbying tends to be you give money to the government, or it doesn't necessarily have to be federal like Congress, but it could be state legislature as well, trying to get your voice heard. It's essentially a technique of representing yourself in Congress. Now, all this debate over lobbying tends to be, tends to be very complicated and not a lot of explanation about it. So I'm here to say why it's economically beneficial and why it's good for our representation, especially in communities here like Olivia that are tend to be very small and not represented very well. Now, essentially, according to Investopedia article by Daniel Weiser, as well as the Open Secrets website, which happens to be evaluating economic and political financial records for multiple years at this point. And slowly lobbying industry has been on the rise. It's a $3.4 billion industry. And that's mostly supported from larger companies, but it also comes from individuals, nonprofits. Essentially, anyone can lobby. Now, according to the New Jersey Central for Nonprofits, anyone can lobby as long as, especially if they're a nonprofit organization, they just have to essentially not lobby as much as they're spending with their actual nonprofit organizations and supports. And also, it's really good for representing small opinions because nonprofits and individuals now with like GoFundMe programs, they tend to be misrepresented, and it's really beneficial for smaller communities. One of the best examples I've found on lobbying in small communities is the Love Canal disaster in 1980. The Love Canal disaster took place in the small, beautiful city of Niagara Falls, or rather, Niagara Falls is a beautiful name. Love Canals tends to be very pretty, but it's honestly the most ironic name that could have been given, because the Love Canal never actually got finished. It was a canal that was disbanded, production halted, and it was used as a reservoir for toxic chemicals, especially once the agricultural revolution started to kick in. All the chemicals were left in this failed canal and just left there for over 20 years. And slowly, through mismanagement, the walls all around the Love Canal started cracking and releasing chemicals into the groundwater of Niagara Falls. And slowly over time, this chemical started to become a literal part of the city's water cycle. They started experiencing heavy rains and slowly started turning acidic. And it's a smaller community like here in Olivia, despite being in New York, it has general same climate, same weather pattern, and a lot of the same flooding issues. About 70% of the issues, the homes in Niagara Falls, according to the 2018 Buffalo News article showing the whole history of this incident, that all these 70% of these houses not only had floods in their basement, but the water was stark white, essentially the color of milk that's been watered down. And so, this issue started to become prevalent, and the government started saying, like, this is an issue, and it's going to be declared a government emergency. So they sent officials out to test all the water, test the soil, and they found chlorophenol and dioxin, which dioxin is the deadliest synthesized chemical that man has ever created. And it was just essentially right next to a bunch of kids, housewives, and it started affecting like reproduction system and caused birth defects in a lot of the children. About one fourth of the kids had either a birth defect or serious chronic health issues. And this started to become a bigger problem, but the government essentially took the 2 blocks that were closest to the canal and said, okay, we're going to take you out, we're going to build you new houses in a different area, but everything else in the area is hospitable. You can live in it. It is fine despite everyone, including the people who are decently far away from the canal, having all these health issues. So all the communities, especially the housewives, started forming the Love Canals Home Association, which started raising money to lobby to the government to understand this is a larger issue, and slowly started forming enough money that the government bulldozed everything down to the town and relocated the entire town to an area a few miles off. Now, this is a good example because the area in Niagara Falls is so similar to us, Olivia. And since there are so many officials that are in our government that tend to be from the cities or generally just don't have enough knowledge to represent smaller communities, this is really a good way of letting everyone know what their opinions are and being beneficial to society economically and representing.
I had 6:31.
I got 6:29.